John, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you on. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. I was a little startled by those swords coming through the screen at me.
I've been told that more than once.
That's a great opening. I was like, oh,
Um, Speaking of great opening, I always like to go back to the start when I speak to somebody. Can you remember your first experience with the horror genre as a viewer, maybe as a kid or growing up? Do you remember I don't know, an experience that sticks out as like quite pivotal?
yeah, there were two actually. Well, actually more than two, but the ones that really I can call up right away. Where I lived when I was growing up was Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the U.S. And it was back at a time where, the parents would just say, get out of the house, go do something, you know, and it was easy to just wander around. And we lived in a section of the city in the East End called Oakland, and there was a great movie theater, a couple of great movie theaters down there. And so one of the ways we could get, be on our own was to go to the movies, and it was cheap enough so that we could, for a few coins, get into the theater. So I remember several movies that we were allowed to see, or maybe we weren't, but we went anyway. Um, and uh, the ones that stood out and really had an effect on me were, first of all, a movie called Forbidden Planet, um, the great sort of sci-fi classic that MGM put out with Disney. And of course, it wasn't a horror movie; it was a space odyssey. But the theme of it, even for a kid of like 11 years old, the thing of monsters from the id made such an impact on me when I thought about it. I didn't really understand it, but I knew viscerally that it was, oh, there's something inside of me that could be crazy. And then, of course, the monster itself, when it hit those beams and came to life, it was scary as hell. The other one that really drove me crazy was The Haunting by Robert Wise. Black and white, I guess you'd call it a haunted house tale, but it's really a psychological thriller. And those two had a profound effect on me. And I guess you'd say the third one that that I saw in the movie theater, which I thought was more of a goof than something terrifying. Although my brother and I went, he was a little younger than me, and he couldn't sit through it. Was The Blob with Steve McQueen?
Yeah, yeah.
All those William Castle movies, The Tingler, not The Blob, that was not his, but those kinds of movies that we went to see when we were kids, really. And then, of course, in Pittsburgh, we had a wonderful late night horror television show called Chiller Theater, which was hosted by the inimitable Bill Cardell, who was a friend of mine and George Romero's. And every Friday night, it was the greatest date night you could have, man. Go back home with your girlfriend, turn on Chiller Theater at 11 o'clock. The parents would be asleep, and you'd see these incredible movies. And Bill paid a lot of attention to the Val Lewton horror of the 40s, which I just adore. Cat People, Bedlam, the Seventh Seal. Although, I mean, not Seventh Seal, but oh God, the name has escaped me. But all of those Val Lewton horror movies, directed by Jacques Tourneur, just fabulous movies, and they had an impact on me. I've made a whole career staying in that space.
At what point then, I guess, in growing up and becoming a teen and later in life, did you, I suppose, take it serious where you were like, you know what, this isn't just something I enjoy. This is also a space that I would like to be in professionally.
I don't know that that was a conscious decision, Aaron, because I went to a school called Emerson College here in the U.S. And studied dramatics, acting, I was a musician for a long time, and so my kind of professional life was bifurcated between drama and music.
Mhm.
And but when I was on the road as a musician for a while, and when that band fell apart, I came back to Pittsburgh, my hometown. And at that time, it was a great um, place to be if you wanted to be in filmmaking. There weren't any independent film, there was no Weinstein Company, there was no Sony Classics or anything like that, but there were people like George Romero around. And I had seen Night of the Living Dead when I was in school in Boston. And I said, I got to meet this guy. And I was lucky enough. My partners and I, Dusty Nelson and Pat Buba, the editor, Pat Buba, had a, uh, a small production company in Pittsburgh, and we were doing commercials and industrials. And we found out that George had uh, these sports documentaries, believe it or not, that he was going to do. We called him up, and he came over to see our stuff, and we started working together. And so that really, my relationship with George was where it became a professional endeavor, and that was that.
Was that just solely down to, working with a guy like him? Was it conversations that you guys had? Was it the business relationship that made it more evident to you that, like, maybe this is the perfect transition for me?
Probably all of the above. I mean, we
Yeah.
became really good friends, and so we hung out, and we would with our girlfriends and wives. Then we would come over to our each other's houses and drink a lot of booze and talk a lot about movies and what we really dug, and then of course working on it. And George at that time was making movies, and my partners and I, when we still had our company, looked at that and said, well, look, if he can do it, there must be a way we could do it. And so we went out and raised, basically a micro budget of funds to make our first film, which was called Effects, Effects. And Dusty Nelson wrote and directed it. Pat cut it. Pat Buba cut it. I produced it and was in it. And because I had the piano, I did the music. It was one of those things. It was sort of really bespoke. I mean, let's just make it up as we go. And that started, sort of look, if we can, this is a way we can do what we love and actually make a living.
You mentioned effects. Was it crazy for you to see, American Genre Film Archive bring that back? I remember I'm not far from Dublin in Ireland here, and, like, going to some of the stores here, like Tower Records and things like that, that
Yeah,
would carry, that still carry physical media, and, like, seeing these giant stands with effects on them all these years later. Is that, like, how does that feel to, I mean, make a project like that all those years ago, and then to see it come back out and people actually really dig it and want the physical copy?
yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, for a long time, it had a very brief theatrical run when it came out. And the distributor, unfortunately, that we made a deal with, typical story, with a low budget indie film. We didn't have much control over it. It was not handled right. They sold it as a slasher movie, and it really isn't a slasher movie. They put it in drive-in movies with, Disney movies, and it was kind of like, oh my God, what do people think when they see this, as a second bill? So it really had a terrible first life, and for a long time, it just lay. People would come up to me and say, "Whatever happened to it?" It took on this kind of cult status. Finally, a small company in Detroit put it out on DVD, Synapse Films, and that kind of brought it back to everybody's attention because now it was available again. You could actually get it on a DVD. And then a few years later, out of the clear blue, Joe Ziemba calls me from AGFA and he says, "Hey, we found our boss is a collector and he goes around the warehouses and he buys everything in the warehouse looking for old movies and prints and stuff. And he found one of the only 35 millimeter prints of effects left in the world. and we have looked at this thing and we love it and we want to put it out. Are you okay with that? And so they did. So here we are, like 2010 or whatever it was, 2012. This movie that is 30 some years old now has this whole new audience. And Dusty and Pat and I would sit around and just be gobsmacked. Oh, I mean, what could be better than all this movie we put blood, sweat, and tears in back in the day? All of a sudden has this new life.
There is something else I wanted to ask you about. Speaking of, I don't know, lost films or lost work or whatever, and that's Scary Tales Night Elevator.
Oh God! How did you find out about that?
So so I tried really hard, like really, really hard. I done quite a bit of digging to try and find information about this. I did at one stage think that I had some weird Spanish dub that I had found. But it turns out that it had been taken down, or I don't know what happened to that. I did find out that it had aired, I think, in October, early November in like 1986. I think only one or two stations aired it. I couldn't find any trace outside of the original broadcast window, but I did find out that it aired one time on a station in Tampa, Florida in October of 1987. But other than that, I literally couldn't find out anything about it.
Okay. So I was directing seasons of Tales from the Darkside, the TV show. And one of the producers came to me and he wanted to do a spin-off called Scary Tales. And he had a script which needed some work, but it was kind of interesting. And it was called The Night Elevator. And I thought it had some really cool elements to it. And so I said, yeah, I'll direct it, because he knew me from all my work on Darkside. He was one of the producers. So we put it together, and but there was a conflict between that producer and the main producer of Tales from the Darkside, who was Richard Rubenstein, who's another friend of mine. And I just think that it got buried in either not so much competition between the two of them, but the producer in LA that created Scary Tales couldn't sell it as a series. And so it just never aired anywhere. I think he tried to, it was going to be a syndicated show, Aaron. So he was going to have to make a deal, not with a network, but with with sales agents to take it around and sell it. And that's probably why it showed up on those two television stations that you that you mentioned. But I never saw it on the air. It was a good show. I thought it was a good pilot, but didn't go anywhere.
It's interesting because, and I don't know how true some of this stuff is. I couldn't find the, where these things were cited from, but I had seen that supposedly there was an interview with Tom Savini, and he had said he considered the Tales from the Darkside movie to essentially be like an unofficial Creepshow 3. There was the Cat from Hell, apparently, that story. They were originally floating that around for maybe Creepshow 2. There was originally supposed to be a sequel to your Tales from the Darkside movie. What do you think it was about the time that there was a lot of these kind of anthology storytelling, and people seem to really dig that both creatively, and then the audience members seem to eat that up as well and love that idea?
Well, from a creative point of view, it was fantastic, because if you had an anthology, whether it was the TV show like Tales from the Darkside, I mean, don't forget, shows like Twilight Zone and Outer Limits and things like that were hugely successful. And I think people liked the format. They knew overall what they were going to get with the Twilight Zone or the Outer Limits or Tales from the Darkside. Amazing stories. The overall concept told you what you were going to get. but you got a different story every week. So for me, for example, doing Tales from the Dark Side, it was like making a mini movie every week, which was fantastic because you weren't just doing the same thing on the same set with the same characters. You were creating a little small short movie, and you could really try, especially with these low budget. And believe me, Tales from the Dark Side was low budget. You could do pretty much anything as long as it played. The producer just wanted something that would be on screen, and if you love the genre and could put in some good special effects, it would be um, acceptable. So Richard Rubenstein, who was the producer of Tales from the Dark Side TV show, George really brought it back with Creepshow when he and Steve did Creepshow, and that was so successful. It was obvious that people would like this format, and Richard sold the television show. And that success actually spawned, I think it inspired Spielberg to do Amazing Stories. It certainly inspired Dark Castle to do, or I forget what they call it back then, but Tales from the Crypt, which came out in the 90s after Tales from the Dark Side. So it was obvious that people really loved anthologies. But I will tell you this: it's a very tough sell to the money people. George and I had several ideas for other anthologies, and we couldn't get arrested in LA. It was just, oh, it's an anthology. No, I don't know. We don't want anthologies. So I think there's a time where people really accept it. Now, today, you got Black Mirror. Um, I'm trying to think of what else is out there now that we just did the Creepshow TV series
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
I did 4 seasons of that, and so there's a market for it. It's just a tough sell.
It's a strange one to me because I feel like they went away after that time period. That was like, it felt like
Yeah,
the golden era, and then they went away for a long time, and sporadically, we saw movies try to kind of replicate that, the ABCs of death, and these different anthology movies tried to
yeah,
bring it
just
back.
yeah, those kinds
Yeah.
of things. Yeah,
And now you mentioned things like Black Mirror. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. There's a British TV show called Inside Number Nine, which also does the same
I've
thing.
heard of it. I haven't seen it. Is it good?
Yeah, it's very good, and it reminds me of a lot of your guys' work back then, more than I think
Uh-huh.
any show. And maybe I'm wrong with this, but is the market maybe not open again for that format? Considering I don't know what your opinions are on this, but I think people seem to have a shorter attention span now, and like even watching a 30-second TikTok video is like too much for people. Would they not be inviting the anthology kind of thing back? Maybe is that why Black Mirror does so well? Because you can spend 40 minutes on a story and then move to the next episode, and I don't have to remember what happened previous.
I'd make that argument, but I don't know that anybody would listen. It's a rare thing. I think Charlie's Black Mirror is successful because his storytelling is so strong. Um, and it also was, I mean, that first episode with the pig was like, okay, if that's what this show is, man, there's going to be an audience for it. It is so out there. Um, and but obviously he has found a niche because at least this latest season and even the earlier ones, he really has tapped into a fear or a paranoia about technology and what happens. So I think it's I don't know. It's kind of hard to say. There has been talk occasionally about redoing Tales from the Dark Side. Creepshow had its run on Shutter and AMC, but I don't think we're doing any more. So I don't know. It's really kind of hard. I think it would have to have a kind of unique storytelling premise, kind of like what Rod Serling had when he did Twilight Zone, what Charlie
Mm.
Booker has with um, Black Mirror. Um, those things are kind of unique. It's not just the same old stuff that is being recycled again. So I think that would have to be uh, the basis of any kind of success. And I just don't know whether the marketplace is is ready for it. Uh, it's a conundrum because the other thing about that period, Aaron, was that when you looked at those shows, because they were a different story every week and they had different writers and different directors, all of whom were a lot of them anyway were young directors that were up and coming and so forth, like I was, and there was an energy to those shows and a passion for what the storytelling was that really came through. So even if they were low budget and even if they had some kind of like funky special effects, they were still great because the energy behind them was so strong. And the passion for doing it and making them fun and cool and scary was all there on the screen.
You mentioned I seen in a previous interview Wes Craven's Nightmare Cafe, and
Yeah.
I had seen you said it was a pity that show only got one season. What was it about? Because I don't think after that, I don't think the interviewer kind of asked you to clarify why you said that. But I was just interested in like what was it about that project that makes you say it was a shame that we didn't see more of that.
Well, I love the premise. Um, the uh, the two people are trapped in this diner, um, and at first they don't even know that they're dead. um, but once they do, they become mediums for helping people in the real world come to grips with the trauma of their own lives. And I thought that it could go so many places. It had a great cast. It had Wes um, as the showrunner, and I just thought it could be very successful because again, even though it wasn't a true anthology, because it did have a recurring cast and a standing set and so forth, the stories felt singular, and so it had sort of a mix of both. Um, and it had all the things that I kind of liked: a bit of supernatural, bit of horror. Um, so yeah, I would have loved to see that go on, and there wasn't anything really like it on television at the time. So, but it just didn't hit.
Yeah, it's strange to me, and I don't know. Sometimes I think this question comes across a little bit weird, or like it's a I don't know, like I'm trying to elicit some sort of response. But I'm always intrigued by, you mentioned the passion, the effort, the energy that went into some of those projects, and I think that's probably what, as an audience member, when you look at it, without maybe even if you don't realize, that's what keeps bringing you back. I mean, to be talking about some of this work that's 30 odd years old and the audience still feel as energetic about it as they did back then. Is that the difference in some of the projects now? It's like an oversaturation where people maybe make things for the sake of making things.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's obvious when you go to the theater and you see something that has an identity, that has a style, that has a passion in the filmmaking. It's obvious. Um, I mean, I don't want to knock other films and so forth, but I just don't know how you can convey that same kind of passion and energy on the seventh Marvel movie.
Yeah.
It's just, you know,
Yeah.
after a while, it's like, okay, I know the formula, I know the characters, I know what's going to happen. So there's no surprise to it. Okay, that effect is a little bit cooler than the one before. Yes, we've gotten the technology to be a little bit better. But I'll tell you what, I'd rather watch some of the 1950s horror movies and their crummy little special effects than some of these huge extravaganzas, which are so overwhelming and, but uh, they don't they don't affect me as much. Now, granted, I'm a little older, but I still think it's true. You can see the passion. Um, when Sam Raimi was starting to make his movies, um, he had no dollies, he had no special effects. I mean, he had people who wanted to work And it was the same with George, same with Wes. Um, and you can tell, you can see, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
why they're successful.
It's and I've made this argument a lot of times with things like CGI. Um, I'm not completely against the idea. Obviously, I know there's a certain amount of things that have to that has to cater for, but I don't know. Sometimes I find with a movie that's just pure CGI, I'm so taken out of like the whole atmosphere and the whole world that I'm like, it's just clearly obvious. It's like CG has gotten so good, it's so unbelievable. If that makes sense, like in no way
Yeah, it
can
does.
I.
Well, the other thing that it does is that it puts a barrier between you and the reality of the thing, because that it can't, those things can't exist. You can't destroy the entire city and have people be smashed and crushed and killed and then come back to life. I mean, after a while, it's kind of like, okay, come on, you know.
Mm,
Um, we have come to rely on spectacle, and we have lost what makes these things really either frightening or engaging or dramatic, which is the human element of it. When we did Tales from the Crypt or Tales from the Darkside, uh, George's Creepshow, you have to look. There's a story there. There's a story with characters that are identifiable, that are relatable, even if you hate them. And that's what engages you, not the special effects. The special effects should be in support of those, not the other way around. And I'm afraid that what's happened with a lot of our reliance on spectacle these days is that we're in love with spectacle and we've forgotten story.
it's funny as well, and I think um, there's slowly a shift maybe back towards that when you see movies like Terrifier 3, for example.
Which I haven't seen, so I'm sorry. I won't be able to
I yeah,
critique.
well, yeah, it's not necessarily even about the story, just more about the sense of like I think they only use CG just to like take out wires and stuff. So
Right. Yeah.
all it's all practical effects in camera effects, and like people seem to really dig that kind of real gritty look. And I'm like, that's I think it's made that switch again where people are like, I just don't want to see a CG thing. I seen a video earlier last week about the most recent Ghostbusters movie, and I didn't notice at the time, but I remember coming out going, huh, it was fine, but it just felt really, really fake. Not realizing
Yeah.
that all the backgrounds, they shot none of that movie in New York City at all. It was all blue screened. So like
Was
even
it
when
really?
they're everything, like they're walking down the steps at one point of a building, it's all blue screened. There was like 4 steps, and that was it. And like now I kind of get it. I'm like, that's probably why it didn't feel as authentic
Yeah.
as
As the original, you
yeah.
know. I mean, listen, there are plenty of, I've seen uses of volume stages these days that really blow my mind. Um, Although it didn't do that well, for example, The Last Voyage of the Demeter really had a wonderful look and feel to it. First of all, it had really good acting and it had pretty good storytelling. And the monster, when it was there, was pretty frightening. Um, but it was they obviously they for budgetary reasons and others they had to create a world that just doesn't exist or would be so expensive you'd never be able to do it. That was a good use of say volume stages and artificial settings and so forth. But I hate to keep pounding on the Marvel movies or the big superhero movies these days, but they basically create worlds that are so fantastical and so, as I say, spectacular that you're kind of removed from it, I think.
Yeah, and especially when it, even when it comes down to simple things like, a bedroom has to be completely CG, an office has to be
Yeah,
completely
I mean, come
CG.
on.
Yeah.
And I don't see how it's that much cheaper anyway to believe, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, like I'm often fascinated by that. Like, is that a budgetary decision? Is that a time frame decision? Like, is it is it quicker to do it on like green screen?
No, 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 no. It's not. And listen, CG and volume stages and those kinds of things can create worlds that you just can't create in the real world. That's what the benefit should be. If you're going to do a Star Wars, or if you're going to do Dune, like I did, the you can create worlds and make use of that technology to really help build the world. But it's not cheaper and it's not faster, and it requires a whole kind of filmmaking mindset that puts the human element really in the back on the back burner, because and actors will tell you they would much prefer to work in a real environment than come down three stairs, as you said, in front of a
Yeah,
green screen. They don't have any world to react to. Um, so and that becomes obvious, I think.
yeah,
I think some filmmakers like it because they come out of a background where they've studied that kind of technology, and they're very into gaming, and so as filmmakers they have a lot of fun creating these worlds technologically. But I'm just kind of old school,
yeah.
I kind of like to be around real people in a real environment, and then throw some shit at the fan and see what happens.
It's funny. I really do feel like there's been a shift again, though, in the last year or two, maybe very slowly, but I find some of the projects that are doing well versus on paper, maybe what studios thought would do well, are like
Yeah,
vastly different now. Like a
that's
lot of those
true.
movies you're talking about, those Disney movies, those Marvel movies, all that kind of stuff. Like I'll be honest, if you look at it on paper, they just haven't performed at all. They've just
Mhm.
flopped one after another. And then you see these movies that are made for, not even a fraction of the budget, and like they have a
Right.
lot of practical effects, and like you said, we have real people reacting to real environments and an actual story, and then these things like have these crazy box office returns. I think it kind of maybe shows the shift in like what the audience wants.
Well, I hope you're right. I mean, I've got a couple of projects now that they're not. We don't have Marvel budgets, so we're going to have to be creative. But to me, that's part of the fun.
That's always definitely been part of your style, right? To be able to, I guess, adapt and work with what you've got. I mean, the transition from Tales from the Darkside TV show and into the movie, um, which I just rewatched again a couple of nights ago. How different, like the wraparound story feels like one kind of story, and
Hmm.
then each of the stories that he tells, they all feel like they fit in the same movie, but they all feel vastly different at the same time. It's kind of a strange, I'm not sure how to explain what I mean. They all have like a different
I
tone
know
and a
exactly
design.
what you mean, though, but that was deliberate, Aaron. That was
Yeah.
definitely a style choice that I made right from the beginning. And it's the reason I like anthologies. Like I told you before, it was like making little individual movies, so that when I approached each of those stories, uh, I said to the team, they're all going to be completely different in not only the shooting style that we employ, but the look of each, the music score for each. They're going to be completely different. They'll be tied together by the wraparound story. I was fortunate to have a brilliant cinematographer, Rob Draper, who could share that vision. And uh, we could give, for example, the Mummy story a very classic 1940s adventure feel. Uh, and we could give Lover's Vow this very cool, blue, romantic feel. We could give Cat from Hell this almost monochromatic black and white terror noir feel. Um, and I got the composers to do the same thing. And so um, we didn't have a lot of money to make that movie. So what we made up for it with style and with uh, filmmaking.
That's something else that I think maybe a lot of people don't know about you. Obviously, you mentioned, you're a musician and you've also done a lot of the music for a lot of these projects. Is that something that, say when you go into Tales from Darkside movie or any project, is that something that's in the back of your head, like that musical brain as well? Because obviously, I don't know if people have ever done this, but if you watch something and it has no score or no kind of sound, it's a very different experience. I think
Yes, it is.
it was lost on me for a long time. The importance of that attention to detail and how that can make you feel.
Well, the other funny thing to try sometime is to watch a movie and turn off the sound and put on another score that you like and see how that music makes you feel differently about the movie you're watching.
Yeah,
Um, I listen, Aaron, I say this all the time, and I truly believe this, that music is as much a narrative element as the dialogue or the cinematography or the editing. It is right up there as a narrative element that is part of the storytelling of any film. And when you see it used greatly, then it really enhances your appreciation of the film, especially in this genre. Um, and it's not just all about shock stings and creepy pads. It can be melodic. I mean, when I did the score for Day of the Dead, I remember that when the movie came out, people said, "What is this? What is this Caribbean music you're doing in this horror movie?" And people hated it. Now it's become more accepted and people like it. But it was a choice that I made that George really liked, and it worked for that particular story. So I, when I'm doing a project, I never think, oh, this is the music I'm going to write for the project because it's just too much. I did do it in television, but for a feature film, and besides which, I'm sort of cutting off my. I love the collaboration of filmmaking. I love working with some cinematographers and editors, excuse me, and and composers. They all bring they all bring their creativity to the project. And
yeah.
why would I not want that? I mean, that's like enhancing what I'm doing. They're making me look good.
In that, is it difficult then? I guess, um, I know what you're saying about enjoying the collaboration, but let's say, I've made a decision that I think it should be this way, and then maybe you listen or you see and you go, oh, I'm not feeling that. How do you navigate, I guess, those conversations to try and? Someone told me before, it's like, you've got to. It was actually Eli Roth. I had done work for his Crypt TV company over a decade ago now, and he had said to me, he was like, you have to learn that skill of, if I need something to be just tweaked a little bit, I'm just not happy with it. I need to make it that person's I need it to be your idea.
Well, that's actually really good advice. Um, I don't know. I've never had that problem. I mean, because I go into it with an open mind, first of all. And if I've hired that person, I've hired them because I like what they do. So I'm expecting uh, that they're not going to go off the rails. But occasionally there's a disagreement about what it should be. Um, Ultimately, I'm the boss, so it's a matter of how gently you can say, this is really not what I had in mind. Let's try something different and see, or tweak it a little bit here and there. That goes for any collaboration. That goes for working with a cinematographer. Fortunately, I have enough vocabulary that I can talk to a musician about what it is I'm hearing or what it is I want. I never say play this note or play that chord sequence. I never do that. But I can talk to them in terms of what I think the music should do emotionally.
You've done, I don't want to say, like, obviously, you get a lot of questions about your horror work, sci-fi, but a lot of the stuff has been horror adjacent. Um, Is that just a world that you enjoy more than maybe some of the other genres, or is it a case of like sometimes I hear, well, they see your work does well, everybody talks about it, and then you get the phone call of like, oh yeah, we've seen Tales from the Dark Side, we've seen whatever it might be, Dune, this, that. It's like just give me that again. I just want that project in a
Oh,
different form.
well, I should be so lucky. you know, It'd keep me working. Uh, no, um, I'm happily entrenched in the genre. Um, I've made a career of it. I love it. I think it's because I don't look at it as, I think great horror is actually mostly metaphorical. It is not only about the story on the screen, but what's coming from the story or what's influenced the story. It may be about a small town, but in wherever, but it's probably about every small town or a lot of bigger issues. So also, I've never been, even though I've worked with some of the greats like George and Wes, I my work has never been characterized by a lot of gore. Um, it's been more psychological suspense and thriller that attracts me. And so it's kind of interesting you should say horror adjacent because I guess uh, it depends on what you call horror. Uh, there are plenty of psychological horror stories that I guess some people would say, well, that's not really horror, that's more thriller. Um, but it's just good storytelling. That's what I look for.
Um, Yeah, I don't know why it popped into my head, but things like and I suppose it would probably fit more into like the thriller aspect, and people will probably want to kill me over saying stuff like that. But things like Donor Unknown and stuff. I felt like when I was watching, don't want to say you can make an argument that it's outright horror, but I was like, there's elements here that like uh while I'm watching the story unfold, I don't know if it's like my brain is filling in the gaps and being like, oh yeah, but what if, oh, I don't know what could be going on behind the scenes that I'm not seeing here.
Yeah, well, I think that's great. I think that's great. And from a filmmaker's point of view, frankly, the same skill sets. I mean, look, I don't do uh, comedy. Nobody's really asked me ever to spend a lot of time doing comedy. I don't really know whether I have that in my toolbox. I suppose I'd try it, but the same skill sets that I bring to say doing Tales from the Dark Side, I can bring to Donor Unknown. The same filmmaking techniques about how to build suspense, about how to um, create fear. They're the same skills, a different story. I mean, that's a story about heart transplants. And there's nothing horror necessarily about it except for the hubris of the surgeon who, has decided to kill people to get the hearts.
Is it difficult, to be a director, but then also to write a screenplay, and I guess the process of that, was that something that I don't know, you have to like chip away at over time, or was it something that you jumped into when a project came up? Like I'm always intrigued as to how people like this refine that skill.
Well, I didn't start out to be a writer at all, but because I didn't come out of a film school and I didn't have a lot of connections in LA when I moved out there, I knew that there weren't going to be a lot of opportunities of people throwing things at me like, "Hey, why don't you direct this?" or writers coming to me with their scripts and wanting me to direct them. I'd have to generate my own projects. So I taught myself the skill. I taught myself the form, and I think I've gotten better at it over time, um, and have learned how to uh, create on paper something that somebody wants to see come alive, and that's an important distinction when you're writing a screenplay, you're not writing something that is going to exist as a piece of written material. I mean, I love to read screenplays and I like, but you got to remember that a screenplay is simply the blueprint for the movie. You've got to create on paper the excitement that people will expect out of the filmmaking. So I've learned how to make the page active and exciting. And those are skills that you learn by reading. I mean, Steve King has a great uh, point of view about just writing in general, which is like you can't be a good writer unless you're a good reader. So I studied a lot of screenplays and I looked at the ones that were very successful as movies and said, why? Why are they? What are they doing on the page? Not necessarily just a structure. It's a 3-act structure, or it's got, on page 27 there's a plot turn. None of that stuff. It was more like, what am I reading in the scene that makes me see that scene? What is it how is he using, or she is using, the words to create visual imagery? So my screenplays, if you ever read them, they're just like bullet points. They're not great prose. You'd never want to pick up a book and read this stuff. But I'm hoping that what it's doing is creating an emotional response. It's creating imagery in your mind. That's the point of it.
And then I guess to further that, once you've got something, you mentioned that you have several projects at the minute that you're kind of potentially excited about getting started. The idea of I don't know, the skill of being able to pitch something, or to maybe not so much pitch, but like I guess I don't even know if I want to call it sell it, but again, getting across to somebody like the money guys that this is what we're picturing. Because a lot of filmmakers have said to me that's another thing that people forget about. It's conveying your idea to the guy that has no idea about what you're talking about. Like, you may have lived with this project for X amount of time. You're going into a sitting across from a guy on a desk. He has no idea. He's just looking at the bottom line. Sell me something.
It's exactly right. And it is a skill that you can only learn by doing. Okay. It's the bane of my existence to go into a room with a studio executive or a network executive and have to sell them the story and pitch the story, because you have to be a performer.
Yeah.
You have to learn the way of telling the story. It's like almost like sitting down at a campfire and trying to tell them, this is why it's going to be great. And I'm going to tell you this story and I'm going to freak you out, or I'm going to make you excited. And you can only learn by doing. I just don't know any other way to do it. There is no manual of say this, then say that. Then at this point, I mean, I've had people, Aaron, I've had a couple of people fall asleep in my pitches. So
I've been told that before.
I will give everybody one piece of advice. Never pitch your project after lunch. Only do it in the morning if you can.
People are bright-eyed.
Yes, exactly. Never after they've had mashed potatoes and meatloaf for lunch and they're nodding off in the middle of your pitch. But it's a skill, and you have to just learn by doing it. And again, you've got to remember, you're not there to pitch the whole story. What you're there to do is sell the excitement of the idea. Because the best thing that can come out of a pitch, if that's how it starts, is, okay, let me see the script. And I know guys that are fabulous pitchmen. And then the producer says, yeah, but the script just didn't have it, it wasn't. And I know that there are some great writers who can't pitch for shit. They just don't know how to do it, but they are great writers. And if you get a chance to read the script, so you've got to find that sweet spot where you can kind of do both, because that's what it takes. And you're going in and asking people for a lot of money. It's not chump change, even low budget. And so people are naturally going to be cautious. Um, and some of them just aren't going to get it, but you have to find a way to cut through.
Has that aspect of the business changed drastically in your time working in it? Like, have you noticed any notable changes? Like, I've heard some horror stories, about people and about executives, or they meet certain people and they just feel like from the outset, like, this young guy just has no desire, doesn't care about the format, doesn't care about the genre or whatever sandbox we're trying to play in. He's just completely like, yeah, whatever, next, next, next. It's the idea of I talk with a lot of Irish filmmakers and stuff, and they get a successful movie made on this side of the world, and then all of a sudden, I until a few years ago, I had never heard of this, like the water bottle tour, where like you visit every studio and like the rental is just full of water bottles, and you come back to Ireland so excited, going, "Wow, everyone loved all my ideas. I'm great. I've really like I've hit the jackpot," and then it's like that phone doesn't ring one time.
They'll kill you with kindness. They'll kill you with encouragement. It's true. I mean, the water. It's that's exactly the way it is, and that's why I say it's very hard to cut through. I don't know. I guess it's sort of always been that way, but what I have noticed during my career um, is it's become rarer and rarer to pitch to people who really have a love for cinema, who really know cinema. I go into meetings now and I don't even talk about old movies anymore because half the time they don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I'll reference a movie and it's just like eyes glaze over, or they'll say, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah," but they don't know. They're just saying that they don't
yeah.
know the movie that I'm referring to. So it does me no good to go in and refer to it's going to be like this movie. You remember that old 1940s movie that Val Lewton made and how there was not a special effect in it, but you were so creeped out by the way he shot it and the shadows on the wall and the atmosphere in the room. And they're going, yeah, yeah, yeah. And where's the CG and all that? It's like, okay, I'm out. So it does you no good to and I try not to be impatient about it, but there's a certain point at which you just have to be realistic, and I'm not coming through somehow. um I'm sort of at a different place than I was. I'm not uh I don't even live in LA anymore, so I'm not doing the constant Hollywood shuffle of trying to get meetings and pitch ideas or have somebody pitch me an idea. See if I'm pretty much I pretty much develop my own stuff. So I can get to a point where I can hopefully find a producer who knows my background and will listen to me. That's what I'm looking for. I'm really not out doing the studio shuffle anymore. The business has taken a really hard hit these past few years with COVID and then the strikes. It's very hard to get a project made.
Is
So,
that just for fear, like money wise, that they won't see a return on the project, or like
of
what?
course,
Yeah,
that's a big thing, but it's also the tastes have changed. People's tastes have changed, and you just pointed out we went through a whole period of big spectacular superhero movies. Now people don't. I mean, look at the Oscars this year. The filmmaking community gave Oscars to all these movies that nobody's ever seen.
yeah.
None of them made any money, uh, and the studios are looking at it going, Honora. I mean, okay, maybe I like the movie, but it made buckus. I can't run a studio on that. Um, so I think everybody's scared. I don't think they know what. And at the same time, um, the media has changed. There are so many competitive ways for people to get storytelling.
Mm.
Um, on YouTube, on TikTok, on television streaming, on television network, on television uh, uh, independent, and then theaters, and it costs a fortune to release a movie in theaters. So it's very tough. People just are taking big step backs.
that the idea of being able to consume content pretty much anywhere. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
we've all got a phone now within arm's reach where we can pretty much access essentially nearly anything. But I still can't help but feel like, as much as I hear all these executives or so-called creatives or whatever talk about, well, soon enough it's going to be like we're going to, consume all of our content through TikTok or something like that. I still don't see it breaking through as much. Like, I mean, I look on TikTok and for want of a better term, like it's just a lot of like brain dead, like
Yeah,
soulless information.
yeah, I
And like I
agree.
don't know if I can ever see that truly being like a proper medium. Like even things with YouTube, yes, there's a lot of stuff on YouTube. Some people find, rips of old documentaries and behind the scenes stuff, and I would consume a lot of things that way. But like I don't know if I could ever see myself specifically thinking, oh yeah, I'm gonna consume all my movies or whatever through YouTube or things like that. As someone who works professionally in the space, what's your thoughts on the idea of, yes, while there is so many different places, as regards streamers, Shutter, all these different apps and all Netflix, everything. At the same time, I can't help but feel, there's probably a handful of good projects that get picked up, but then the problem is, they get dumped on Netflix next week with 45 other movies and projects, and then we don't get a
Yeah.
chance to see them.
Well, it's a problem, and I don't know what the answer is to it. I've never been in that side of the business, so I don't know what the the mentality or the thinking is. But I don't think that movies are ever going to go the way of the dodo. I think people love the experience of going to the movie theaters. I think what happens is if they get the same menu of storytelling over and over again, then you're going to drift away from it. Um, and it don't forget, I mean, it costs so much to release a movie, which then makes it so much to go to a movie. I mean, take your family to a movie these days, you got to come up with $150 by the time you buy the tickets and the popcorn and everything else that goes with it. So, I mean, you've got to make a choice, and that movie better be good.
Yeah.
You better come out of the theater saying, man, that was worth it, or you're not going to go back. And now we can have like 100-inch TV screens. So, okay, that looks like an interesting movie, but I think I'll wait till I can see it because I got surround sound. I got a big screen. It'll be a pretty good experience. Um, but I don't think it's going to kill the movies. But I think uh, you have to find a way to uh, make people want to go to movies that aren't the same. And I don't know what the answer is because, as I say, it's very, in this competitive world, it's very hard to cut through the noise and get people to want to go to a movie when you're trying to advertise it because it costs a fortune.
Yeah.
To release a movie costs as much to promote it as it does to make it.
Which is something I
And
think people don't realize.
people don't realize it. So if you got a $10 million movie, you're probably going to have to put close to 10 million into advertising to get people to come and see it. Um, and that's a big investment. Um, so you can see why the powers that be try to bet on. Well, man, look at all the special effects and look at the star that's in it and look at the big action and so forth. And you know, but again, that's not my area. I don't have a background in marketing or however they think. So
Do you think about that all in your creative process? Like when you have multiple projects that you're thinking about, trying to pitch them or get them out there. As you're creating those worlds, do you think about, this is something I don't want, not specifically as in, oh, this is a Netflix show or this is an
right,
Amazon
right.
film or anything, but is that something that's, in the back of your mind about like, okay, what's the best way, we should go about maybe having this actually made and be seen?
Not really. I mean, maybe I'm just old fashioned, but I think if it's a movie that I would like to see, then I figure there's a lot of other people who would like to see it. So I try to, at least with my work, I try to do stuff that I would like to see, that interests me, because then I'll put that passion into creating the project.
Yeah, of course.
And hopefully I'll be able to get somebody that is interested enough that they'll help me widen the audience for it. So I can't really sit down and say, I'm going to sit down and write a superhero movie this week because I know that that's what's selling. I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
don't have it in me. And Fortunately, I'm in a genre, or I've been associated with a genre that seems to be pretty evergreen. As
yeah,
long as you come up with good horror stories
yeah.
and good suspense thrillers, there's always a market for that.
Is that something that you've noticed? You know, I suppose personally and kind of behind the scenes, that like how supportive the fans of the genre are. I mean, we get quite diehard when it comes to things we love, and you know, we've talked about lots of projects that you have made and been involved with, you know, over 30 years ago now, and people still talk about them as if, you know, they were released last week. Um, you know, is that something that you see much of in your interactions on different shows, and maybe chatting with fans and things like that, that it's probably one of the more excited communities out there, I think.
It's amazing, and I'm obviously I'm thrilled, and thank you everybody out there because it. Uh, I mean, I encounter people that know so much more than I do. They'll come up and they'll talk to me about, the character development in this movie, 25 years ago. God, I did see that movie, didn't I? It's it's amazing. The stuff that they remind me about my own stuff that I've forgotten. Like you just like today, bringing up scary tales and things like that. I wouldn't have thought about that in a million years if you hadn't brought it up. So the fan base is fantastic, and it's really great to go to some of these things, and you see a lot of the same people over and over again, which is okay too. But uh, it's a great thing when you have that kind of fan base that's so in love with the genre.
I do have a few more questions before I let you go today.
Sure.
Is there any unmade projects that you can think of that you would have loved to have made? Now, obviously, I understand there's probably things and ideas there that maybe have blossomed into stuff you might be working on now. But is there anything that sticks out in your mind that maybe you were supposed to work on or potentially were working on that just never came to fruition?
Oh, sure. George and I, he wrote it, and I was going to produce it with him. He had a version of Dracula that was
Oh wow.
sensational, and we had actually sold it to ABC, but they didn't make it. Um, that would have been that was pretty damn good. Um, I did an adaptation of a very successful European graphic novel called Strix, and it was a uh, going to be a limited series. And even though the book came out of Europe, I was going to set it in Southeast Asia, and it had a incredible monster and a whole uh, great theme of interspecies uh, development and human evolution. And I just would love to do that. But it just kind of didn't. We almost had it sold, and but one of those stories just didn't quite get over the finish line. So yes, there are several of them like that. Um, and there are a few that I got made that I wish more people had seen, that had been promoted better, like Clive Barker's Book of Blood. It
Yeah.
just didn't. It came out at a time, uh, 2000, right after the financial crisis. The producers needed to get their money back quick. They made some lousy deals, in my estimation, and it ended up more on television than anything else. And but it was I really loved that movie, and I loved my adaptation of it, and Clive did too, and we had a great time making it. but it just didn't find the audience. And so, yeah, what can you say?
It's funny because I done a piece recently on Midnight Meat Train, and
Oh yeah,
I was doing a lot of
with Anthony.
research. Yeah, and I was doing a lot of research, and I'm actually going to be chatting with Jeff, who done the screenplay for that
Oh yeah. Hmm.
as well. And it's funny just from looking, back at some of the archived footage of like Clive talking behind the scenes and things like that. And he seems to be the number one guy that was like, all my work just seems to every time we adapt something and we feel really good about it and everybody involved is excited and really passionate. And he's like, I feel like we always get fucked on that last step. And that was
Yeah.
another movie that kind of ended up the same. And they just like, I think the week of release, they were like, oh yeah, no, we're not releasing, like, we're not giving a major theatrical anymore. We're doing
Yeah.
like it's
We're just going to
unfortunate.
throw it out there. Yeah. Yeah.
It's
And it,
unfortunate.
yeah, it's really unfortunate, and it's something that's outside of our controls as filmmakers. So you put your blood, sweat, and tears in it, and months of work, and then it kind of fades. I mean, at least I got to make it, and it's still there. And maybe like effects, one day it'll come back. You
But this
know?
is the thing. Yeah, that's the thing I like about the community, I think, and all these different companies, like, like Agfa and, you have Synapse, you've all these different companies, 101 Films in the UK, you've Umbrella
Yeah.
Entertainment in Australia, all these different companies that try and bring these movies back to the forefront. And I definitely feel like the horror audience, it kind of finds its people over time.
Mhm.
Do you find that something that happens often? The idea of, you mentioned selling a story or a movie or a TV show to a company and then they don't make it. Is that something that companies do because maybe they see the potential in the idea and it's like, ooh, we can't let them walk out the door with that idea. So let's just buy it, put it on the shelf, and then if we make it, we make it, and if we don't, we don't.
Um, I don't think that happens that often, because that's if they paid you to do it, there's a fair amount of money that they've invested. So just to put the money into it and say we're going to kill it, I don't think makes a lot of sense. I think it's more that things change
Mm.
from the moment they've bought it. The idea, oh, we're really excited about this, to the moment the project gets abandoned. So many other things come into play. Maybe the screenplay didn't live up to expectations, or maybe the place they thought they were going to sell it to has changed their entire MO in terms of what they're making or putting out, or they can't people can't justify the amount of money it would take to make the project. I mean, I think in terms of Strix, that's one of the things that happened. It was not going to be a cheap show, um, but and I think people got a little frightened of it. That, oh, this is pretty big. This is maybe a little too big for us. I don't know. I wasn't in the room when those decisions were made. I just know that it kind of drifted away. Um, but I don't think people have bought stuff to take it out of the market. I think that would be a foolish business decision anyway. Foolish, spent expensive money.
Another thing that's, I guess you could call it in some ways. Well, I feel like a lot of fans of horror would also, dig something like Dune. Um, and you were involved in that universe, I guess, long before a lot of mainstream audiences now think of, the two most recent movies, and they're
Mhm.
these huge, like, blockbuster, fantastical, like, worlds. And I don't know if you've seen, like, if you look on YouTube, there's some channels that do these fantastic, like, deep dives into like the lore of Dune.
Yes.
So
Oh
maybe
God. Yeah.
maybe for somebody who doesn't want to sit down and, cycle through the books and find out everything like that, you can get it in kind of a, I suppose, a short form where it explains all the different
Yeah.
characters and the
Yeah.
backstories and motivations. Um, as somebody who was involved in that so many years ago, and for it to be so well received then to now, fast forward whatever 20 years, and to see them be brought onto the screen and it made feel like such an event. What was that like?
I thought it was gratifying. I mean, I was involved with it only to the extent, even though I'm an executive producer of the latest ones with Richard Rubenstein. Um, we were if I can claim uh, any share of Denis movies, it would simply be because I was not involved at all, so I don't want to imply that I had anything to do with it. Um, we were involved because the success of our miniseries changed the attitude about what Dune could be. As much as I love David Lynch as a filmmaker, his Dune was not successful, and it not and not entirely through his own fault. I mean, they changed the movie, and he wanted to take his name off it, and they basically did not. There's a lot of great stuff in that movie, but by me as a lover of Dune and the world of Dune and the storytelling that Herbert created over 7 books, um, it was not the Dune that I wanted to see. And I think people thought, well, this book is just unadaptable. It's too thick. There's too much. We can't do it. It's never going to be a movie. Well, we changed that attitude by doing the miniseries that we did, and they were hugely successful internationally and in the States. And right after that, um, the the word started coming around. Well, maybe we could do a theatrical version. And Richard and I, uh, there were several attempts that I am so glad never saw the light of day because they didn't involve us, but because we were involved, we had to sign off on them or look at them or whatever. And let me just say, the world is a better place today. We're not brought into the light of day. However, when Legendary finally got it with Richard's help, got the rights, and brought on Denis Villeneuve, it was okay. First of all, I love him as a filmmaker, and I've loved his other movies. It was like, okay, this might have a chance of being really great, and he's done a fabulous job. So I don't. Hey, I got my shot. I did mine. They were successful. I'm glad that it's been brought to a wider audience because I love that story. I love the
Yeah.
whole world of Dune, and I'm one of the few that has read all 7 books and loved them. People said, "Oh, I got the first book, but boy, he really went out there on the rest of them." I said, "Yeah, boy, they were great."
Speaking of that, do you get a chance to consume many films or books or TV shows or things like that, or is that something that you actively do? Sometimes I get differing answers from creatives. Some people, feel like, well, if I'm working on a project, I try not to consume too much in case I'm inadvertently pulling ideas or styles from something else. And then other people are
I
like,
never
oh, I
worry
love
about.
to just
Yeah,
consume.
that's me. I do too. But I don't rush out and see every movie that's made.
Yeah.
I don't rush out and see every horror movie that comes down the pike. I just don't have that much bandwidth. But no, I love it. And so fortunately for me, I've actually been able to, because it's so hard to get any television or movie project going. I've found a sort of a new career writing novels. And so I've written several recently that have just been published. One's called Residue, and one is called Passing Through Veils. In fact, I'll show them to you. Um,
It's also something that I'm fascinated by because I was kind of segueing into the idea of, you mentioned you never got into film to be a writer, and then, you went on to write screenplays. And then that transition, I'm right in saying this kind of all started like at the start of the pandemic.
mhm.
How does one go from, as somebody who has spent years and years and years, um, trying to, in my own small little tiny way, um I guess, craft stories on a page that I feel like, yeah, this is something that I would be happy with somebody else reading and maybe enjoying. How does one just decide, you know what, I've got lots of time now, it's the pandemic, I'm going to write a novel?
Well, I didn't decide it like that, but uh, I had more time because I wasn't actively engaged in a particular project. And although one of these has turned out, I did do the prequel to it as a film in the UK,
Mm-hmm.
as a 3-episode miniseries for Netflix. But um, that's a whole long story in and of itself. But to me, it goes back to just the way I've looked at all of this stuff, which is it's all storytelling. The media, the medium might be different. It might be a film, it might be a television show, it might be a book, but it's all storytelling to me. So I've practiced the craft in order to make it accessible, but I've never looked at it as being so distinct and separate that it's kind of like, why are you out stepping outside of your lane? You know, well, I'm not. I'm a storyteller. So I'm telling you the story, but I've chosen to write it as prose, as a novel, as opposed to writing a screenplay and then trying to make the film of it or the television show of it.
Was that were these ideas something that you already had, maybe in your mind, and had you floated around the idea of writing novels before, but just time constraints didn't allow it? And then obviously the pandemic kind of freed up a lot of people's time.
Yeah, I think that that's true. The idea sort of percolates, and then it's what am I going to do with it?
Mm.
Um, should it be? Is it a film that I'd like to make? Or, for example, this book that just came out, Residue.
Hmm.
It started. It was going to always be this book, but some producers in England that I have worked with in the past. In fact, I did Clive Barker's Book of Blood with them.
Hmm.
I had told them the idea, and they said, "Well, this is really great, um, but the book isn't going to be ready for a long time. Is there any way that you can uh, sort of create the prequel to the story of this book?" And I won't bore you with the whole plot, but and I said, "Well, yeah." And so I created this sort of the backstory for what this book is about as a 3 episode miniseries, which we then produced in the UK. So it's kind of funny how that all came about because it was just an idea I had, but I thought, well, this could really be expanded into a book, and yet I made a television show out of it first.
That's and I think that says a lot about about your work, and your ability to maybe craft a story. I don't know if that's a lot of people maybe just listen to the show just for pure entertainment and it's very surface level, which is completely fine. But I don't know for anybody else who's a bit more of a cinephile or interested in stuff like that, it might be lost on you. Like, I guess the difficulty of being able to sell your idea so well to get someone excited about it that they ask you to create a prequel show before the book is even ready. I think that's quite an achievement.
I was kind of stunned, to be honest with you, in terms of how they came about doing it. But I think it was just right place at right time too. They had a need for something that they wanted to do. They also had a young director because doing it in the UK, even though I had done Book of Blood for them, this time they had a whole financing scheme that required them to have a British director, and they had a young fellow that I met and liked very much, and so I kind of collaborated with him on the creation of that. Um, and it it started off that they were going to do it as a what they really initially asked me to do was this was back in the day when what was it, Quibi and things like that were coming
Mhm.
out, where they were trying to do like bite-size um, like TikTok video
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And so the whole idea was, well, maybe we could do this story as 25 5-minute episodes. And so I started developing it that way. And then they finally said, no, we don't want to do that. But we do want to do it as a television thing and then put it all together as a feature. And it aired or it went out in the UK as a theatrical for a brief period of time before they sold it to Netflix.
Is there a potential that we see either the book get adapted or something else in that universe on screen?
Well, I would love it. I talked to my agent about uh, maybe trying to find somebody to do
Mm.
this as because it would follow on perfectly the story. if you know the story, or when you do find out about the story, you'll see how perfectly it could work. So I would love it if that would be the next incarnation. I'm also, this is part of a trilogy, so I'm working on the second book already. So
Is that something that you think about while you're creating the story, or does that tie into what you said not that long ago about, it's just the medium, and if the story is there and the story is right, it can kind of be, I guess, adjusted based on whatever medium is chosen?
well, I didn't start out saying I'm going to write a 3 book trilogy. I wrote the first one and I thought about it and I thought, well, this story really doesn't end. I mean, there's still
Mm,
places I could go with it, and that's what's led me to go. Like the other one. Excuse me for this shameless self promotion
of
here.
course, I love it.
Um, this is the book that came out last year, Passing Through Veils, which is a psychological thriller with a bit of a supernatural edge, and it's a one-off. I don't see this. This. I'm hoping my agent can maybe set up as a limited series, um, and but I don't see it really. I mean, I suppose if somebody came and said, "Can you really come on? Let's do a sequel, or let's see what happens next, or something." I suppose I could think about it, but I haven't really thought that at all.
How does one, like, what does your and obviously without getting into like minutia of every little thing, but how does somebody have the time to create all these stories and these different works? And then you mentioned there's things that you can't talk about that you're working on and potentially trying to pitch and get made and different things. There's a lot of young people out there, I think, who feel like, oh, I just don't have time, and I'm so tired, and I'm this and I'm that. And I think, you've had this long career, and that fire hasn't seemed to have like quelled at all. And I'm just kind of fascinated as to, are you a very regimented and structured kind of person? Is it a case of when you feel like maybe there's something coming to you, it's time to, grab the laptop or grab a notepad and just start to write things down?
Well, early in my career, fear was a great motivator because
Yeah.
I had to make a living,
Yeah.
and then I had a family. So, um, but I can't help it. I mean, that's just the way I am. The stories. I mean, I'm always thinking about that stuff. It's just so, if you could see my desk, there are post-it notes everywhere about things. It's a cluttered mess. Um, but so and a lot of times things will just percolate for a while. And if they continue to percolate and I continue to think about them, I can't stop thinking about them, then it's time to sit down and actually try to, get some coherence to it. But you're right, I'm pretty disciplined, pretty structured. I'm good in the morning to write, I'm good in the afternoon to rewrite, if that's the case. If I'm on the floor, then you know what it's like. It's just all consuming. If I'm directing something, I can't do anything else.
Yeah.
But if I'm in this mode where in between projects or whatever, then I try to have something going all the time. I'm not very good at. I get bored easily, so I'm not very good at sitting around and staring off into space. I have to be. I mean, I do that a lot, but I have to get it down after that.
That, yeah, because that was going to be my follow-up question was, do you find it difficult even after all this time to switch off that creative brain? Like I definitely deal with this at a way, way smaller, lesser, like not even comparable, but the
Oh, I'm
idea of
sure
like,
that's not true.
there's times I'm places and maybe I'm not as present because I'm like, oh yeah, that thing. And then wouldn't that be cool if this and if that? Do
All
you
the
have
time,
difficult? Yeah. Is that a
all
difficult
the
thing to
time.
switch off?
Yeah, all the time. It's impossible. And so I don't even try.
Yeah.
Even if I'm watching something else, it's giving me, ooh, that gave me an idea about this thing. I better pay attention to the movie, but that guy, and it may have nothing to do with the thing I'm watching. It may be, it
Yeah.
just, The mind is a crazy thing. Things get stuck there, and then it just needs a little trigger, and it might not have anything to do with the thing you're worried. It just that trigger came from somewhere, or the
Mm.
muse,
Do
just
you have
came
any
down.
do you have any comfort movies, whether that's horror or otherwise, like movies that you would say you viewed, multiple times?
Oh, yeah, God, yes. Well, Haunting is one of them. Forbidden Planet is another. Um, but uh, Lawrence of Arabia, are you
Yeah,
kidding me?
yeah,
At least once a year, have to sit through the whole thing. The Godfather, the Godfather movies, many of Scorsese's movies. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of them that I just watch repeatedly. And then old movies. I mean, one of the great joys of both my wife and myself here in the States is a channel called TCM, Turner Classic
yeah.
Movies. And there was a period of time last year when the powers that be were thinking about shutting it down, and people went nuts. You can't do that. I mean, because it is really one of the few places, unless you're a real cinephile and will go around and haunt all kinds of stores and so forth to find these things if they exist. And some of them don't. These people find them. I don't know how they do it. They've got access to the film libraries, but the people at TCM are just absolute treasures. The movies they come up with. Eddie Muller has a series called Noir Alley, nothing but film noir, and he's written books about it, and it's just, I mean, it's fabulous. Um, and but all then they'll do a whole day of a particular actor, or they'll do a whole day of a kind of a movie musicals, or they'll do a whole day of just 1930s movies, or they'll do a whole night of silent movies. They found all these, and it's just, you know, so that's comfort food.
Yeah, and I feel like that definitely it still has such a huge place. Like what you just mentioned there about, they were talking about maybe potentially shutting it down and then people went crazy. And it ties into I suppose something I was going to ask about, physical formats, physical media, both with your own movies and then in general. And then the format of like I'm an avid reader, but I love to have the physical book.
Yeah.
Like I will read on Kindle, sure, but there's something for me. There's a connection there for me with that, and similar with uh movies that I love. There's a connection there with having that physical, like the definitive collector's edition or whatever it might be, and it might have the little, 50-page booklet that has maybe an updated interview with yourself, maybe with some behind the scenes things, and
And the extras, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
man.
and
Yeah.
and and I just love to have that. What's your stance on I suppose like physical media and even tying into things like Turner Classic and stuff like that?
I've got hundreds of DVDs. I've even got VHSs that I
Yeah,
still have, and I had to find an old VHS machine because mine broke, and they don't make them anymore. So,
I know. Yeah,
so I have that, and I've got Eddie Muller's book from TCM about noirs, and in fact, then one of the purchases that I need to make this week, he's got a new book out called um, Dark City Dames, I think is what it's called. It's all about the women of film noir, So, uh, yeah, I love to have that physical stuff in my hands. I'm not a big reader online of books and stuff. I don't. I have a lot of friends who love books on tape because it's easier for them when they're exercising or
mhm.
driving to listen to the book. I don't like that. I got to have the book and read it.
And I think as well, obviously, it's not a physical thing that people can have or collect or anything like that. But what we've just done right now for the last hour and 20 minutes is feeding into the popularity of this feeds into that, I think, because people want to hear from the person behind the project, how it's made, how do they think, what's their life like, what's something that they went through that maybe I went through. Oh, there's something I didn't know about that movie that I thought I did. And all those little things, I think it's becoming more and more. I don't know if it's a connection between like the audience and then the person behind the camera or behind the story. but I've noticed a massive uptick in people wanting to know, and not the generic questions, not just like, oh, well, how was it to make Tales from the Dark Side?
You're right, right. What are the funny
There's,
stories you can tell me about the cast or something like that?
yeah, but
Yeah,
like,
I know what you mean.
there's definitely a connection there, I think.
Well, I think it's because these things mean something to us. If you really like a movie or if you really like a book, there's the cultural influence of it, and the personal influence of it. And if you become attached to a story, um, it seems only natural that you'd want to know, well, how did this come? How did this story come into being? Why? Maybe there's an insight from the creator that tells me why it means so much to me.
Yeah,
I'm the
yeah,
same way, man. I The
yeah,
first thing I do when I get a movie or a DVD is I look at the extras.
yeah,
Then
yeah.
I look at the movie.
Yeah, I'm so bad for that. I don't know, I don't know what it is, but there's just something there for me that I love hearing. I will watch a movie sometimes three, four times if there's multiple audio commentaries before I even watch the actual movie. I've watched it, like I'll be on like my fifth time and then I'm watching it properly.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the commentary is also great, and that
Yeah.
for me, Aaron, that goes for even music stuff. I
Yeah.
love the documentaries about what it was like in the studio when they were making that record. I love the American Masters, is the name of the show, where
Hmm.
they have individuals doing um, uh, background on, well, what was going on around Beethoven's life when he wrote this symphony, or Aaron Copland's symphony, or the other day we were watching a show with this fabulous guy named Scott Yu, who was talking about a 15th century composer who came to Spain and actually invented the formal classical music of the guitar. Because when he came from Italy to Spain, he was inundated with all this folk music on the guitar and all the Spanish people that had created all this wonderful music. And my God, I've got to I've got to formalize this in ways, and he did. And this show just went into all of that and all these fabulous Spanish musicians, flamenco musicians that were, and just it was like that kind of behind the scenes stuff was just like I was riveted.
And it's funny the amount of times that if I was on the other side of this and I was listening to this conversation, I
Mm.
may hear you talk about something like that, and then instantly I go down a rabbit hole, and
Yeah,
I'm now all of a sudden I'm enjoying that thing which I didn't know about before.
absolutely. Well, that's the beauty of your show, man.
Yeah, that's what I love about conversations like this. Where is the best place for people to support you to kind of keep, I guess, up to date with what you're doing, or where would you like to direct people to?
Well, I have some people that help me with it because I'm kind of an old guy. Well, I'm not an old guy, but I mean, I'm not a social media maven.
Yeah,
So I have
yeah.
some people. I'm on Instagram. I'm on uh, Facebook, um, and my official website is all one word, officialjohnharrison.com. So if people go there, they can see everything about me. And I try to stay somewhat current. I post. I'm not a lot. I'm not. Here's what I had for breakfast, or I'm going down to the store tonight. But I will put stuff out, and so yeah.
For everybody listening or watching, all the links will be down below in the description anyway, so we'll make that really easy for you. All the links to buy John's books, check up on his work, his social medias, and stuff like that will be down below in the description. I have two final things I want to ask you before I let you go. Two super quick questions. One
Okay.
was, and I think the collectors here and the fans of horror would kill me if I didn't ask this question, is have you kept anything from any of your projects? Any
Oh
props,
sure.
any
Oh
things like that?
sure.
Anything that sticks out as like, oh yeah, I have that thing.
I'll tell you one because people always want me to sell it, and I won't. I did Creepshow with George Romero,
Yeah.
and if you remember that movie, there's a famous episode called The Crypt,
Hmm.
and it's about the monster that comes out of the crate and eats you. Great, great episode. I love the music that I wrote for it. At the end of it, we had to do a shot where um, Hal Holbrook takes the crate. He's trapped the monster in it, and he's going to dump it in the quarry, and
Hmm.
hopefully the thing will drown. So he has the big crate, and we weighted it down, and we have the shot of him up on the edge of the quarry, and he pushes it off, and it's supposed to go down and go into the water. Well, the only way we could get the shot of it hitting the water and sinking was to create a miniature crate that was about a quarter of the size. Looked exactly like it, right down to the detail. The production designer was so cool, and we had the camera set up so that we could drop it into a tank and it would sink and all that stuff. And I asked the producers at the end, if there's one thing I can have, can I have that? And I asked just at the right time because there were two or three other people behind me, including uh, they can remain nameless, but they were high up in the food chain and they wanted it too. But I got it, and it's upstairs, and it will never leave me. So I've got that. There are a few other things I've got. Oh, I'd have to go looking for them, but there, yeah, just a few things here and there. But
There's,
that's the most notable.
I would say there's collectors that are screaming right now that would love to take any of that stuff
It
off your
is the
hands.
original. I guarantee you. I've seen others. I've seen knockoffs out there, both the big one and the little one. But I can tell you, I've got the one that was on the set that we used.
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that. I've had several conversations with Bill Malone, and he
Oh
spoke
yeah.
about he obviously he was a big collector of film props and different things like that, and he just mentioned that years ago he was like it was a completely different time, Aaron. It wasn't like it is now where people are offering crazy money. We used to literally dig in the dumpsters outside the studios, and the amount of
Totally.
times that he showed up to sound stages and they were literally like, oh yeah, this is all trash. We're just like, this is garbage, so you can do whatever you want with it.
Yeah, go take
You
it.
can
Yeah.
take the garbage if you like.
Well, it's funny. It has changed quite a lot. But I mean, I'm looking at your background there with all of your masks and stuff, which is just fabulous. I've been really loving that.
It's I do have some actual original pieces, but like it's crazy the amount of money that now
Oh, it's
costs. Yeah.
totally. And I have two. My friends Tom Savini and Greg Nicotero are huge collectors,
Hmm.
and you go into their houses, and it's like going into a, Forrest Ackerman horror museum.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, their whole house, their wives must be saying, "God, can you stop?"
Yeah. There's
I'm
a
not
very
that
good
bad. I'm not that bad.
for anybody listening. There is actually a really cool YouTube video of Tom's collection, which is quite vast to say the
Yeah,
least.
yeah.
Final question, and before I let you go, is I was going to ask. I always ask why horror. I don't know if that's too kind of pigeonholed of a question, but maybe why filmmaking, or why storytelling? What is it about that makes you, I guess, draws you back constantly, and what does it mean to you?
I don't know that there's an easy answer to that. Like I said earlier, it's just that's sort of who I am. I can't stop it. Um, I think from an early age, that's just the way I was. I loved drama. I loved theater, and it was just what I was drawn to. I guess in a way, um, you can you can say that it was the way that I figured out the world. And I've always been. Nobody's ever accused me of being subtle, Aaron. So I'm drawn to storytelling writ large, which is why I probably like horror and suspense and thrillers and so forth. Um, mega dramatic stuff. Um,
Mm.
but I think if that sounds a little bit pretentious, but I do think it's true that that I've learned a lot about the world through storytelling, both doing it and consuming it.
It's a
And I
funny
think that's just the
dynamic.
way I've always been.
It's a funny dynamic, you know, to be sitting here chatting to you, and it's like you feel the same way about creating the stories, about figuring out the world as I felt when I was escaping into those same stories you created, and then
Oh,
figuring out things. And I don't,
so
yeah,
that's
I
what
don't know how to.
happened to you.
I know, right? But it's, you know, it's a funny dynamic how from both sides of the perspective,
Hmm. Hmm.
people can get things, and I definitely think, you know, so many times people reach out and say, "Oh, could you ask this question about this movie?" Or "This movie helped me through a really bad period of my life," or "This is the movie I go to when, you know, things are not so great, and I can kind of just escape back into that story and forget about everything else that's going on."
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Um, it's why it has survived all this time. Why I don't think it'll ever stop. I mean, I
Mhm.
don't think no matter what we do technologically and how we consume stories, maybe it will be great when we have these goggles and we can actually live in the environment and Apple Vision Pro and all that stuff. Um, but there is something about a shared experience of sitting in a movie theater, like a collective dream, and being able to share those stories, even if it's just at home with your family watching these things, and it'll never go away. I mean, we've been doing it since human beings were upright,
Yeah.
telling stories.
John, this has been a fantastic conversation, an eye-opening conversation, actually. And I could talk to you for multiple hours, but I won't take up any more of your time.
Oh,
I
I've enjoyed
appreciate
it.
you taking the time. It's been fantastic. I would love to stay in touch. I wish you all the best. I can't wait to see maybe or hear about some of these projects that you have brewing at the minute.
You and I will communicate.
And hopefully, when some stuff gets announced, we can revisit again and maybe have a chat.
I've enjoyed it immensely. Thank you, Aaron.
It's been
I
fantastic.
hope I didn't ramble on too much.
Certainly didn't. And like I said, for everybody, whether you're listening or watching on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any podcast platform, or on YouTube, Rumble, or any of those, all the descriptions to John's stuff will be down below in the description. So make sure to check that out and support his work. Like I said, John, it's been a pleasure. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you real soon.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks.